Hello, and welcome to Gibraltar.
Back in September, I flew with EasyJet from Gatwick to Gibraltar, one of the few countries or territories open to British-based tourists without quarantine on the way out or the way back. A link to my video about that flight is in the description. Gibraltar is famous for its rock, for being a quirky blend of Spain and Britain, and for its monkeys, and believe me, they don't disappoint, and you won't want to miss the footage I've submitted for the next episode of When Monkeys Attack. So here's what I found.
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next, and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
Gibraltar has been a British overseas territory since 1713, when it was ceded to Britain as part of the Treaty of Utrecht. Despite being a signatory to the treaty, Spain has never been entirely comfortable with Britain's control over the territory. It occupies a strategically significant location at the mouth of the Mediterranean, and its southernmost point is Europa Point. This pleasant park is home to the Ibrahim al-Ibrahim Mosque, gifted by Saudi Arabia and believed to be the largest mosque in the world located in a non-Muslim country. Further evidence that Gibraltar is a complicated place.
This is a pretty fascinating part of the world. Over there is Africa, Morocco to be precise, and over there is the southern part of Spain, leading round and turning eventually into Portugal. Just over here is a small territory called Ceuta, which is an enclave of Morocco controlled by Spain. A little bit further down the coast there's another one called Melilla, forgive the pronunciation. Spain has held on to those for centuries, a little ironically perhaps given their resistance to Britain's retention of the Gibraltar territory over that same period.
Europa Point is popular with dog walkers, has some interesting old fortifications, and also a monument to General Władysław Sikorski, who led the Polish forces in World War II before dying in a plane crash in Gibraltar in 1943. I got to Europa Point by bus. Indeed, I travelled pretty much everywhere by bus. A day pass costs £2.50 and allowed you to travel anywhere on the network, which was extremely good value. There was even an app which showed you where the buses were to minimise the time wasted waiting at bus stops. You probably don't associate Gibraltar with beaches, but perhaps you should. The number 4 and 8 buses both take you to the eastern part of the territory, which feels like the back of the rock even if there's no real front, rear or sides to it. I spent some time on the innovatively named Sandy Bay beach and even had a paddle. Constructed with Saharan sand in 2014, it was really, really nice. All the more so if you're able to tune out the array of container ships bobbing on the near horizon. So, a top tip is to take your cosy. Downtown Gibraltar is not exactly huge, but is pleasant enough, with a pedestrianised shopping street containing some familiar British high street staples. Gib is a duty-free territory too, so there are bargains aplenty for any alcohol enthusiasts among you. Remember though, that if you're like me and travelled with only hand baggage, you'll not be able to take any liquid purchases through security. The duty-free shop at the airport post-security was still good value. Check out my video of my flight back from Gibraltar for more on that. But if you are a very enthusiastic alcohol enthusiast, at those prices a trip might pay for itself. The focal point of the town is Casemates Square, a large open square with bars, cafes and restaurants aplenty. I have an unbreakable rule though, never to eat in the main square of any place I'm visiting, as they're usually overpriced tourist traps. I did though have dinner at the number 1 rated restaurant on TripAdvisor. It was an Indian-Japanese fusion restaurant cunningly called Curry and Sushi. Fusion is perhaps the wrong word, as there are menus for each cuisine rather than fusion dishes, but it was very good and the service was excellent. No consideration has been received for this endorsement, more's the pity. I also had some decent tapas, although it didn't compare that well with much of what you find in Spain. You'll have noticed that my hostess at the restaurant was wearing a mask, and people were required to when indoors. This was well enforced in retail shops I visited, although I did see a number of bars where people were milling around indoors without masks. Bars did require you to complete a contact form before service. Despite Spain being a hotspot for the virus, with Gibraltar being right on its doorstep, The territory has, perhaps amazingly or perhaps suspiciously, recorded no deaths from the virus at the time of recording this voiceover. I stayed at the Bristol Hotel, close to the main shopping street. When it comes to hotels, Gibraltar is a little peculiar, as there are only ever half a dozen hotels in the territory that show up in online booking engines, although I did see more on the ground that I hadn't seen listed. The best value is usually to be had by staying in Spain and crossing the border each day, but that wasn't an option this time. I picked the Bristol for the simple reason that it was the cheapest. It was a little dated, with an almost alpine feeling to the interior corridors. It was also typically European in offering 2 single beds and having an air conditioning strategy that was clearly retrofitted and was not the quietest. But it had a charming pool area and garden, a good location and very friendly staff, so I would happily stay there again. And while we're talking logistics, the airport is about a mile from the downtown area with plenty of taxis available. I actually walked into town, which involved crossing the runway, which may be a unique feature of a trip to Gibraltar. Let me interrupt here to invite you to like this video, to subscribe if you're new. There is no charge, it is completely free, so click away, and also to leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. A quick word on the money there too.
Sterling is the currency here, although euros are widely accepted. Little spot check I did though, you didn't get a particularly good exchange rate, so probably best to bring pounds if you can. Lots of ATMs here, so you can get sterling out of machines, but you will probably get Gibraltarian currency. British notes are accepted here, but Gibraltarian isn't accepted back in the UK, so make sure you don't go home with a pocket full of Gibraltarian banknotes, unless you're a collector, of course.
The big attraction is the rock itself. There are 3 options for seeing it. The first is to walk. This would appeal to the young, the mentally ill, or to those of you endowed with any goat DNA. The second is to take a tour. Plenty of companies offer these, and as the roads are very narrow and windy, they are offered in small vehicles. Tours like this will, in addition to going up the rock, take you to other places like St Michael's Cave, which I'd visited on a previous trip and is quite spectacular. The third option, which is the one I chose on this occasion, is to take the cable car to the top of the rock complex. This isn't cheap, but depending on how many of you there are, it can be cheaper than a tour, and the experience was fun, although it wouldn't be for those with vertigo. This footage is speeded up. The views from the top are absolutely spectacular, and are perhaps better than those you get from the vantage points accessible on vehicular tours. So, the monkeys, Barbary macaques to be precise. The colony is carefully managed, although they have become so accustomed to tourism that interactions are common. Interactions such as this one. Thanks to Craig for letting me share his discomfort.
Anda, que no quita los chicles.
Oh my god!
So I took a cable car up the rock today. It's quite a spectacular journey, nearly vertically up the side of the mountain. When you get to the top, you're in a pretty confined area. There's a cafe and a gift shop and various bits and pieces. But it's a bit tricky to get out and explore further than just this complex. There are monkeys here, as you've seen. But I think if you were to take a personalised tour in a smaller vehicle, you would see more of the rock. You'd also get more of an insight into what is actually going on up here from the local who's guiding you. Still get the same view, probably get a similar monkey experience, but overall I think a personalised tour is probably the better way of doing this.
And so back down again in the cable car. Gibraltar is a fascinating, quirky place that is unlike anywhere else you might visit. It also has the huge current advantage of being on the ever-dwindling list of countries open for tourism. It's light on Michelin-starred restaurants, 5-star hotels and on world-class cocktail bars and nightclubs. But it does offer friendliness, good weather and some interesting things to see and do. I like it, but I can see how others might not. I'd describe it as being a small English seaside town, lightly coated in a certain degree of Spanishness, that has been transported somewhere with great weather. And if that sounds like your sort of place, enjoy. Thanks for watching this video. Please like it if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and leave me a comment. Have you been to Gibraltar? I'd love to hear your stories.